And a very good Saturday morning, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. We're in Charlotte, North Carolina. The day has finally come for the Final Four in the NCAA March Madness Tournament. Welcome to the show. I'm Chris Pardo. I'm here in Charlotte. We're here. And of course, we're going to be talking about the big tournament coming up for later on this afternoon and into this evening. The Final Four. It's what we've been waiting for. And then, of course, we get the break tomorrow, and Monday night will be the final game of the series. So, anyway, I hope you're feeling good today. It's time to go Saturday morning. You got some baseball going on out there, NBA basketball, you got NHL games, and there's a golf tournament that you could be betting on. So there's a plethora of various different betting situations. But today, of course, we here at the Zone will be participating and really looking at and spending the most time on the Final Four in the NCAA tournament. So you're listening to us on I-95, the Sports Entertainment Network. We're also podcasting. We're on most of the major podcast platforms, such as, Apple, of course, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Amazon Music. We're on most of the major platforms as well. So welcome to the show. Let's take a quick look and see what the odds are so far coming into this afternoon's game. Baylor is still a 5-point favorite against Houston. And, of course, the over-under is at 135, and we'll be keeping an eye on that as we go. That starting time for that game is somewhere around 5:15 Eastern Standard Time on CBS, the major network. Meanwhile, UCLA, Gonzaga, you have Gonzaga still being a 14-point favorite to some teeter-tottering on to 14.5 at some of the houses, but 14 seems to be the prevalent number so far. And as far as the over-under is concerned, that's at 145, 145.5. It's kind of in that area as well. The game is scheduled for somewhere around 8:35 p.m. Eastern Time. Once again, nationally broadcast on the CBS network. So that's the story as far as the game is for tonight. We'll take a close look into the show as we get closer into it. We're going to take a look at the two games on tap. We're going to see which way the line movement has been going so far and in which direction the pros seem to be going. I can just tell you this, as a kind of a prelude, one of those games, the pros are kind of mixed on it. Some of them are on one team, and equally, you have just about as many on the other side as well. But we'll go into that after we have our first break. So, as usual, the first thing we do is take a look at what happened yesterday in the world of sports as far as betting is concerned. In Major League Baseball, the underdogs, the dogs were barking loud and clear yesterday, 5-2. Against the spread after a 7-5 day on Thursday, So far the dogs are 12-7 with one pick'em. The biggest upset was by the Orioles yesterday. They were a plus 155 against the Red Sox. The overs went 5-2 after an 8-5 Thursday. So altogether now the overs are 13-7, despite what some people are calling a deadened ball. But, I'll tell you, when you see runs being scored the way they are, there was some skepticism as to when the major leagues came out and said, we're going to kind of deaden the ball, we're going to soften it a little bit. Well, if they did, it certainly didn't do much good so far in the beginning. Anyway, the first 5 unders, they went 4-3, and the F5 overs lead 10-9. We're talking about the F5, the first 5 innings in the game. So that's the story with Major League Baseball. Now let's look at the NBA. The favorites were really big there. They went 8-2 straight up and 7-3 against the spread. So the muzzle was on the The barking dogs over there at the NBA had upsets by the Hornets, though. They were 5-point dogs against the Pacers, and the Lakers were 4.5-point underdogs against the Kings. The Bulls were 11-point underdogs against the Jazz. They covered in spite of losing the game, okay? The favorites increased their lead from 356 to 349 against the spread, which is a little over 50%, with 9 games being a pick'em. The unders went 8-2 yesterday, and they take a 360 to 355 lead as far as that's concerned over the season so far. Meanwhile, the National Hockey League, dogs were quiet there as well. The favorites went 5-1, although the Coyotes were the only favor to also cover as a -1.5 on the puck line as well. And of course, the lone upset that one was by the Sharks. They were a +105 against the Kings. So the unders, they went 5-1 yesterday. The Coyotes against the Ducks was the only game that went over. And of course, the unders now lead 281 to 261. That's almost right at 52% for the season. Meanwhile, first period unders went 4-2, and they're at almost 54% for the season. So that's kind of a quick wrap up, a look at some of the action that went on yesterday, kind of give you an idea as to how the favorites did, how they're doing, how the dogs are doing, how they did yesterday. And of course, in some instances, like in baseball, doing very, very well yesterday, and in basketball and in hockey, not as well as the other. So anyway, that's the story there. Of course, the big story for today, this afternoon and this evening, the Final Four, 2 games on tap for tonight. We're going to take a close look at both those games, kind of give you an idea as to which direction, if any, the line is moving, and also kind of give you an idea as to in which direction that the pros are going as well. So anyway, we're going to take our first break, and like we always tell you, we do take 3 breaks within the show. They're only about a minute and a half each at most. So with that in mind, let's take that first break. And just a reminder, we'll be back into the sports wagering zone right after this. And welcome back. You're back in the sports wagering zone. I'm Chris Pardo. We're coming to you live from Charlotte, North Carolina, on the I-95 Sports and Entertainment Network. Also on most of your podcast platforms just as well. We're on Apple, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Amazon, just to name a few. We're on almost most of the major platforms that are out there right now. So welcome to the show. We definitely, no doubt, we appreciate you listening to the show. Our numbers, like I keep telling you, the past couple of weeks, we have been doing very well and doing better. And a lot of that has to do with you guys out there telling your friends, telling your relatives, even if you're in other states. Remember, if you have a relative or a friend in one of the other states that you're not living in that does have legalized betting, tell them about the show. Try to help them along. Again, the primary purpose is not to tout you onto any games or any teams. We're just trying to make a better handicapper out of you and trying to teach you some things that we found to be very, very good throughout the years. Line movement, looking in which direction the pros are betting, is one of the ways that we have been doing and doing very, very well over the past few years. But of course, all we can do is give you the information. You can take that information. Maybe you might be able to make it part of your system, whatever system you're using, if you're very happy with it, okay? But, sometimes you may want to tweak it a little bit, make it a little better. Or maybe you're right on the borderline. Maybe you're somewhere around 48, 49% in that particular area. You want to get to that 52.3%. Perhaps some of this information, if you kind of include it and use it in your thinking with your system, it might help you go a little further, maybe into the profit column. That's all we're trying to do here. That's the whole story. Not trying to show you how smart we are or how good we are or whatever that is. With the whole thing is we want to make a better handicapper out of you, and that's the primary purpose. So, like we said, the long wait's over. March Madness comes today, back again. You got a pair of Final Four matchups. And of course, if you were a contrarian bettor, once again, if you've been listening to the show, we here at the show are primarily contrarians. A contrarian bets against the public. We see in which direction the line is going. If the public is going in a certain direction in a big way, we go the other way. And so far in the NCAA tournament, the dogs have been barking pretty good. 35 and 28. 35 wins, 28 losses against the spread. And if you were doing that, if you followed it throughout the tournament, you'd be at 56% percentage right now. Now, of course, the unders, they've also stolen the show, going 37 and 24. They're up to 61%. So the dogs have been doing very well in the tournament, and also the unders as well. Now, some of the people have been talking about why the unders have been doing as well as they have, and one of the reasons was the fact that Lucas Stadium is so huge. I mean, it's just tremendous. It's large, seats well over 100,000 people. So when you imagine a basketball court being in the middle of all of this, it's kind of strange. It's kind of different. It's unfamiliar territory for most of these teams as they come in. And because of that, the sight lines are different. A lot of things come into play. It's just one of the reasons why you're seeing so many under games coming in so far. But in the meantime, let's take a look at one of the games coming up today. Somewhere around 5:15 Eastern Time this evening, Houston Cougars against the Baylor Bears. For the first time ever, you have two Texas teams that are in the Final Four. It's hard to imagine. For the first time ever in the tournament, this is the first time you had two teams from Texas facing off against each other. You have the second seed Houston Cougars at 28-3, and they faced the number one seed Baylor Bears, who were 26-2. Now, Houston has really taken care of business against four of the double-digit seeds in the NCAA tournament. They beat Cleveland State. That was a 15th seed, easily 87-56. They beat Rutgers, a 10th seed, 63-60 in a very close game. They beat an 11th seed Syracuse, 62-46. And finally, 12th seed Oregon State, 67-61. So Houston, in all those four games, has been favored, and they've gone 2-2 against the spread. Now they're up against the powerhouse Baylor Bears. They've beaten the number 16 seed Hartford, 79-59. They beat Wisconsin. That was the 9th seed, 76-63. The number 5 seed was Villanova. They beat them 62-51. And finally, they beat the 3rd seed Arkansas Razorbacks 81-72. Now, in all these games, the Bears have been favored, and they went 3-1 against the spread. So if you bet the Bears in every game, you are ahead right now. As far as betting Houston being 2-2, you're at a break-even point. More than likely, because of the vigorish, you're probably in the minus column right now as far as that team is concerned. So that's all what happened in the past. Let's take a look and see what's going to be happening today. The line, as far as we're concerned, let's see. Let's take a look at the line. Trying to bring it up here on the board. Trying to see what the story is. Okay, looking at the line, it opened with Baylor, a 5-point favorite. We all know that. And for much of the week, the line has kind of been frozen. Hasn't really gone anywhere. Now, earlier in the week, we saw that 5-point lead got juiced up to minus 115, up from 110, which is the normal juice. Anytime you go above 110 or below it, that's a change. And if it's going up, you call it being juiced up. So it went up to 115, which signaled that there could be a possible move to 5.5. We've talked about this process on the show before, how one of the first things that happens before the line gets moved in any direction is first they juice up the VIG. Then it gets to a certain point. Maybe if it goes to 120, let's just say for the sake of argument, instead of going to 125, they will take the line and move it up to 5.5 and dropping the juice back down to the 110. But they never actually got to 5.5. What this means is probably a reluctance to hand out that extra hook to people that are betting on Houston. They don't want to give them that extra point, half a point. Over the past 24 hours, though, we've seen the juice even out at 5, okay, and at minus 110. So it's right where it should be. In fact, some of the books are now juicing up the Houston side. In other words, if you take Houston taking the 5 points, they're juicing that up to 115. So, in other words, what I'm trying to say is the late money seems to be breaking on Houston, and it seems more likely that the line will more than likely go to 4.5 than it will go to 5.5. That's how the sports books protect themselves. So if you're looking at this game, and if you like Houston, you might want to get in earlier, because there is that possibility it may go back down to 4.5. It's possible. Okay. Of course, if you do like the Baylor Bears, then just sit back and wait, because if it goes to 4.5, then you'll be able to get an extra half a point in your direction. Now, the one thing we do know is that Houston offers a real distinct Ken Pom edge. And we've talked about Ken in the past. He is a guy that has a rating system that is very well respected by everyone in the business. Now, he has Baylor winning by just 1 point. He thinks the score is going to be 72-71 by all of the metrics that he deals with. Now, that means you have actionable value on Houston at this number that it's at now at 5, or even if it goes to 4.5. Now, March Madness on the short dogs, in other words, dogs who are 5 points or less as a dog, are at 65% so far in the tournament, 13-7. Now, when the line stays the same, or if it moves towards the dog, those teams are 20-13. They're also in the 60s at 61%. So that's something to look at. Houston also has value because they're a slow-paced dog. They're at 55%. They're 24-20 against the spread in slow-paced games. We've also seen some under money coming in now. Drop the total from 136 down to 134.5. So March Madness unders that stay the same, or if they drop, they're at 61% in this NCAA tournament. The under is 3-1 in Houston's games in the tournament, and the total is 2-2 for Baylor. Houston's pace is 64.4, one of the slowest in the country. Baylor is also on the slow end at 67, almost 68. Actually 67.9. Let's just say 68 for the sake of an easy number to remember. So in this particular situation, It looks like the pros are going on to Houston in this game, and they're taking the points. So that's the way that's going. The line has been steady, been staying at 5 almost all week long. Looks like, according to the juicing situation, it looks like there's a good possibility that it'll probably go to 4.5 before it goes to 5.5. So kind of look at it from that perspective. So that's the story on that game. We try to tell you as much as we can about it. That's all the detail. That's all the information. You deal with it as you see fit. Maybe we'll agree with some of the things we've just said. Perhaps you've been following it. Maybe you've been following the system on this as we've been going along. And, maybe you've been doing very well. Maybe you haven't. Maybe you think it's time to make a change. Whatever it is, just keep certain things in mind. Short dogs that are 5 points or less, are at 65% in winning percentage so far in this tournament. And also, when the line stays the same, or if it moves in the dog's direction, it's at 61%. So either way, it looks like Houston, from an analytical standpoint, and of course with Ken Palms figuring it's a 1-point win for Baylor, it seems like the logical way to go in this game, and the pros are going that way, is on Houston. But again, that's up to you. You decide which way you want to go, which one of those facts you want to pay attention to. Just like everything else, certain things are more important to you than some other things that might be more important to somebody else. So anyway, that's the story on the first game. We're going to take our second break. When we come back, we're going to take a look at UCLA against Gonzaga. A little different situation there. So let's take a look at that. But first, let's take a little break, and we'll be back right after this. And welcome back. You're back in the sports wagering zone. I'm Chris Pardo, coming to you live from Charlotte, North Carolina. We're on the I-95 Sports and Entertainment Network, also podcasting on most of your major platforms like Apple Podcasts and iHeartRadio. I keep repeating them all the time, but generally those are the ones that we're on. So if you want to listen to us later on, sometimes you can't listen to the show at the right time. You have to catch it a little later. Very simply, just go to any one of those situations and you can hear the podcast as well. So that's the story. Thank you very much for listening. Like I always tell you, we really, if we're sitting next to each other, I could try to let you know how really thankful and how we like the idea that you guys are listening to this show. We love it very much. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. Anyway, let's get back to the business at hand, and that is the Final Four. We just got finished going over the Houston-Baylor game. In that particular game, all the analytics, the pros, all seem to be pointing towards Houston in that game. So that's the way they see it. That's up to you to take whatever information we give you. If you can use it, by all means do so. It kind of sounds, if you've never listened to the show before, you kind of see we're more of an analytical situation here. We try to get away from emotion. Forget about emotion. Get it out of the way totally. If you have a lot of emotion on games, you have your biases, you're never really going to do very well. You have to take the emotion out of betting. Just go by the numbers. The numbers don't lie. Go by the stats. Go by past performances or whatever it is that you think is important. But those are the things you have to look at before you make your final decision. So finally, the last game for today is the last game of the night, 8:35 Eastern Time. National game. Everyone's going to be watching it. CBS, UCLA against Gonzaga. There'll be a lot of money coming in on this game because after that first game ends, you only have 2 games. That's it. So after that first game is over, you're going to have the winners are going to be coming in to try to make more money on the second bet coming in. And of course, what usually happens, most of the guys who lose, they say, oh, I got to try to get even. I'm going to bet on the second game. So there's a lot of money usually flows in the last game of the day, no matter what sport it is, okay? And especially a sport like this, March Madness, that has a tremendous following. So UCLA against Gonzaga, prime time. You got David and Goliath here. It's a matchup. You have an 11th seed team, UCLA. They were 22-9 for the season. They're up against that number 1 seed monolith Gonzaga, undefeated, 30-0. UCLA, well, most people think they're the Cinderella of the tournament. They're the highest remaining seed that's left in the Final Four. The Bruins are also the only 5-0 team that's in March Madness because they had to get into the play-in. They won their first 4 game over 11 seed Michigan State, 86-80. Then they beat BYU, the number 6 seed, 73-62. Then they came back and beat the number 14 seed, Abilene Christian, who happened to win a few games coming into here, 67-47, before they had that big upset against the number 2 seed, Alabama, 88-78. And then the number 1 seed, Michigan, 51-49. Now they had their toughest challenge so far. Of course, it's against Gonzaga, who's only 2 wins away from the first undefeated championship season since going back 1975, 1976. The Indiana Hoosiers, Bobby Knight was the coach of that team. I remember that situation very, very well. Gonzaga is a perfect 4-0 against the spread. So if you're on Gonzaga, you're doing very, very well in the tournament. They're covering all favorite spreads. They've had to lay. So as far as Gonzaga and betting, they've been beating the spread as well as been winning the games. Gonzaga crushed number 16 seed Norfolk State 98-55. Then they beat 8-seeded Oklahoma 87-71. Then they beat Creighton, the number 5 seed, 83-65. And finally, they beat USC, the number 6 seed, 85-66. So that's the past. Now let's see what's going on now. So the line opened. You had Gonzaga as a 13.5-point favorite. The early money jumped in at 13.5, driving the line up to 14. Now, at times during the week, we saw that 14 get juiced up to 115 on the money line. What that usually means is there's a possibility that it may go to 14.5. Now, some of the books did that. And when they did do that, when they went to 14.5, as soon as that happened, they hit the board. In came the money once again, and they came in on UCLA at 14.5. as a buyback to cover the other way. So as soon as it went up to 14.5, now the UCLA money started coming in even stronger. And of course, when that happens, drop back down to 14 where it sits right now. So it seems like dueling pros. Some teams, some of the pros have Gonzaga when it was 13.5, and some of them have UCLA at 14.5. So right now, as far as this game is concerned, and it's not exactly 50-50, whatever it is obviously they're separate on this one. There are many that believe Gonzaga. They were able to get in at 13.5, so they took Gonzaga. Then once it went up to 14.5, the other group got in on UCLA once it made that move. So they're split on it. So once again, it's going to be up to you to decide which way you want to go, as usual. But at least in this situation, hey, they're kind of split. So if you're kind of split on it, you're kind of looking at it and saying, boy, this Gonzaga team is so strong. But if I have to lay 14 points, they don't look as strong to me. So you have to look at it from both perspectives. Pros are looking at it the same way. The ones that got into 13.5, they took Gonzaga. As the line went to 14.5 for a brief moment or two, they jumped on that UCLA number. And as soon as that happened, it had to be a ton of money coming in because right away it dropped right back down to 14. That's how the pros in the sports books protect themselves. Now, meanwhile, Ken Palm, he has Gonzaga winning by 12. He thinks the score is going to be 83-71. So this way, if you are on UCLA, kind of gives you a slight edge from that standpoint at the numbers that are available to you right now, whether it's 13.5 or 14 or 14.5, whatever you can get. Now, remember this, that double-digit dogs are at 57% in this tournament so far. Dogs that have 10 points or more are at 57% in this tournament so far. Now, looking at the total, it opened at 146. It dropped down to 145.5 in some places. And now, when the total is 140 or more, which it is here, the under is 17-9 in this tournament, which comes out to 65.4%. Okay. If the line stays the same, or if it drops down, the under is at almost 72% in the tournament so far. So the unders have really been coming through. And like we said earlier, I think part of it has to do with the enormous size of Lucas Arena. Just imagine, you got this huge enclosed arena with a roof, seats over 100,000 people. In the middle of this room, in the middle of this stadium, is a basketball court. Now, you know how small they are compared to what you're seeing here. It's not like in a college dorm or college situation, college gym, where you're watching the game and it's taking up most of the room. In this situation, it's like a postage stamp down there. And because of that, it has a different mental effect on many of the players. It has their sightline differences. They become familiar with zeroing in on a certain point that they're looking at. And when they look at that, that's when they make their shots for the 3-point plays and things of that nature. It's not been happening at Lucas Stadium. So that's just something to think about. Now, like we said, it opened at 146, went down to 145.5. And when the total is 140 or more, the under is 65.4%. If it stays the same, or if it drops, the under is almost at 72% this season in the tournament. The under is 3-2 in the UCLA games during this tournament so far. The under is 3-1 in the Gonzaga game so far. Now, UCLA's pace is 64. It's one of the slowest teams in the nation. That's just another thing to look at, and why most of the money seems to be coming in on the under. Gonzaga, on the other hand, they're one of the fastest teams at 74.2. So take a look at it that way. You got one team that moves fast. You got another one that goes slow. Whoever takes over, that's the direction it's going to go as far as the over-under is concerned. So once again, that's a look at the late game. It's going to be somewhere around 8:35, 8:30 on CBS, UCLA against Gonzaga. And like I said, almost half of the groups, the pro bettors, have jumped on Gonzaga when they were giving 13.5 points. Once it went to 14.5, the other half came in and took up on UCLA, getting the 14.5 points. And as soon as that happened, almost instantaneously, because the surge of that much money moved it back down to 14. That's how the sports books protect themselves. So that's the story as far as those two games are concerned. We're going to take our final break, and when we do come back, we're going to take a look at a final look and see where the lines are sitting at right now as far as Las Vegas is concerned. Of course, we always tell you, make sure you check with your own sports books in your community, because they are the ones that will give you the ultimate number. And the whole idea is you want to deal with as many sports books as you can. We preached this from day one when we came on and started doing the show. You have to work with more than one sports book. That's the only way you're going to get the best possible price for what you're looking to bet. So let's take that final break. And when we come back, we'll take another look at the lines as far as Vegas is concerned and kind of take it from there. So we'll be back into the sports wagering zone right after this. And welcome back. Welcome back to the Sports Wagering Zone, coming to you live from Charlotte, North Carolina on the I-95 Sports and Entertainment Network. So just to review what we talked about today, I'm looking at the board, the odds in Las Vegas, and at the Houston-Baylor game. And in that particular situation, the pros are on Houston in this game. They are looking at them. Right now, it is at 5. Baylor is still a 5-point favorite across the board. Now, as far as the over-under is concerned, some of the houses are at 135. The other ones are at 135.5. It's kind of split right down the middle right in that situation. 135, 134.5 is where it's cut right now. Now, with UCLA and Gonzaga, I see some of the houses are at, well, one of the houses just dropped back down to 14. They were at 14.5, and in the past 5 minutes came down to 14. So now you have one house in Vegas that's at 14.5. The rest of them are 14 across the board with Gonzaga. Now, the over-under in this particular situation, still at 145.5, 146, and some of the houses, the majority of them right now, are at 146.5. And in this particular game, as far as the pros are concerned, half of them are on UCLA when they got the 14.5, and the other half is on Gonzaga, especially when it was down around 13.5 when it first opened up. So that's the story as far as what direction the pros are going, what direction the line movement is going, and those are the latest numbers that we have on the board from Las Vegas. Once again, Gonzaga, still a 14-point favorite, 14.5 at one of the places. Baylor, meanwhile, across the board, 5-point favorite in that situation. So anyway, that's about the story as far as today's concerned. It's the Final Four. It's coming down to the end. The final will come up on Monday night between two of these four teams that are playing this evening. So if you're going to be betting the game tonight, whichever way you go, I wish you the best of luck. I hope you make it. I hope you do well. Pick the right teams, and then get ready for Monday night as well. So that's the story. I hope you do well. It's Saturday. I hope you have a very pleasant Saturday. But like I always say, more importantly than that, I hope you have a profitable Saturday as well. Okay. Anyway, thanks for listening. We'll be back again tomorrow, Sunday morning, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Saturdays and Sundays, 11 a.m. Monday through Friday, we're here at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. So that's the story for today. Like I said before, if you're betting tonight, good luck. I hope you do well. And if you're not, sit back, relax, enjoy the games. They should be exciting enough for you. It should be a good game. Well, we said that about the last game with Gonzaga. With USC, it kind of turned out the wrong way. If that happens, we kind of hope it doesn't, because you really want some activity, but you don't want it to be a blowout. You want to sit back and be on the edge of your seat throughout the game. That's the way it should be. Anyway, thanks again for listening. We'll be back tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern Time on the I-95 Sports and Entertainment Network. Until tomorrow, I'm Chris Pardo. Thank you for listening, and have a very pleasant and a profitable Saturday. Goodbye, everybody.